Welcome to the Executive Pill podcast, where we bring on the brightest and most successful leaders that share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions, and today's guest is about to change the way you think, work, and lead. Let's dive in. Today we have with us the amazing Mr. Retired, I'm not sure if I should say retired, I'm not sure, you correct me at the end, but retired Major General Christopher Hughes. Chris is a results-driven consultant and executive coach with expertise in strategic planning, innovation, leadership, and operational organizational design. Chris brings 35 years of leadership experience in the U.S. Army, from platoon leader to commanding general. Over the course of his career, Chris served as the executive officer for the Secretary of the Army, the Army senior liaison to the U.S. House of Representatives, and he commanded an infantry platoon from the 101st Airborne Division, which is freaking amazing, during the invasion to Iraq in 2003. But Chris, if that wasn't enough, Chris is also the author of the book War on Two Fronts, where he recounts his experience in Iraq and the Pentagon. He also assisted in the creation of five major organizations, the creation of five major organizations within the Department of Defense, and served as an investigator on the USS Cole Commission in 2000. Now I'm sorry, we're dating ourselves. Finally, let's just jump in. How are you doing today, kind sir?
Well, you're giving me flashbacks, but thanks.
I felt horrible. Look, I was like in 2000 is not a thing.
Yeah, I never knew what to call it. 2000, 2000.
Dude, you and I haven't actually seen each other in person now for a few years.
Yeah.
But when I ran into you, we were at a conference. We were at a conference here in DC, and you were on the stage and you were talking about, as you've talked about many a times, why the military, being an individual within the military, is a unique profession. And I think it truly is. And I'm gonna let you speak on that, but really quickly, just the leadership you experience that you get throughout your journey in the military, and the high stakes at the same time. Would you mind to say a little more on why just being a leader, being an individual in the military, I can say every military person is a leader. So being someone within the military, why it is a unique profession?
It's interesting. In the work that I do now, I'm doing a lot of research. I'm working on a doctoral degree now in leadership, interdisciplinary leadership. And I've been trying to, do enough research to actually answer that question in a more scholarly fashion than what you might hear from most. And so let me describe it like this. Just a quick story. So in the 70s, there was this guy who robbed two banks at gunpoint in the same town. And he didn't wear a mask or anything. And he was shocked when he was captured. He was caught by the police later that day and arrested. He was like, "How did you figure it out? It was me so fast." And he said, "Well, there were cameras and we could see your face and we figured out who you were. We came to your house and we arrested you." And he said, "But you shouldn't have been able to arrest me." They said, "Why?" He said, "Because I was invisible." He said, "Well, why do you think you were invisible?" He said, "Well, I rubbed lemon juice on my face." And they go, "Why would you think that would make you invisible?" He says, "Well, I did a science experiment with my son and we wrote with lemon juice on a piece of paper and you couldn't see it until you heated it up because lemon juice makes things invisible." And so that's a true story. And so as a result, two scientists, Denny and Kruger, decided to look into why would a perfectly logical human being think that, because there was nothing mentally, disturbed about the gentleman and family man and everything. And so when they were finished doing their study, what they learned is that there are individuals who get information and they have a high degree of confidence. And so they created an X and Y axis, if you would, with high degree of confidence and high degree of knowledge on the other side, and zero at the apex. And so What they showed is a lot of people will get one piece of data and believe that that is the answer, that is the secret sauce, and they develop a high degree of confidence, and they're very vocal about it, and they're very demanding about it. And what you find is their degree of ignorance is very high. Okay, they're confident, but they don't really have a lot of knowledge behind that piece of information. What the Army does different. I'm not saying that everybody's like that. What I'm saying is that most people are like that when they're younger. And in the Army, what we do is we pop that confidence bubble at the very beginning of the day. You say, I swear, I support, defend, whatever the oath is that they take, whether you're an officer or enlisted, we pop that bubble. And what we teach young men and women from the very second they step into that formation is you don't know what you don't know. And when that happens, they show in the study that that level of confidence drops all the way down to almost depression. But what's different about the Army is we then grab them at that point and we begin to walk them down that journey of knowledge. And when you look at our educational system, our professional military educational system, we're training, and a little education goes from training to more education, then education, a little bit of training. Over time, what you do is you build that person's knowledge, and then it becomes wisdom over time. Now, because it's very formal with us, and it's very deliberate, and it's constant, it's every 3 years you're in school, okay? And then between those 3 years, it is a requirement to be mentored. And then you have asymmetric mentors. And so that leadership development and that growth toward wisdom is on steroids compared to the non-structured civilian environment. College is interesting, but I would argue with you, having been in higher ed, that's, again, a little bit of knowledge that makes you think you know all that. And so young people get real excited about, I'm a college graduate, I should start here. And you go, no, you got to pop the bubble and say, you're just average. Now let me take you on that journey. And so it's the mentorship, it's the put in charge of people immediacy of the military. It's the mentors that carry along from symmetrical to asymmetrical mentors. And it's the extreme conditions of applying that leadership that makes someone who's been in the military, I would argue, like dog years in terms of leadership experience for their civilian counterparts. So when a young captain gets out of the Army and he's standing in front of a CEO and he's saying, well, you're only 32, and he's going, yeah, but I've done more than you've done.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain that. So that's what I mean by that.
So if I can, I want to piggyback. You said so much already.
Sorry.
No. This is awesome, because when you talk about dog years, I completely agree. And again, being in DC, and I'm working with a lot of government agencies as well. It's dog years because they have so much experience practicing and theory, right? Both of those in such a short period of time. And it's the same reason why when people leave the Hill, like people are like, oh, you're only working there for 3 or 4 years. How are you where you are now? Well, it's because there's so much has to get done within a short period of time that we consider those dog years.
Yeah.
When you talked about, you and I had this conversation last we spoke actually about just how intentional the U.S. military is about developing its talent. Now, this is something that's obvious. I think everyone who's listening right now, when I say this, you're like, duh, but I wonder how many times you've actually thought about this. So you realize that the generals, the majors, the colonels, the captains, everyone, all those leaders who are extremely, extremely successful leaders grew up in the military.
Yeah.
That's internal. They're not they're not going to Goldman Sachs and let me hire a general from over there. That's not how it works. And so I'm consistently torn when companies come to us, GPS, to help them, do some training. Oh, let's do some training here. We have some new employees coming in. When I'm like, okay, yes, that's nice. But what are you doing to develop that actual pipeline of internal talent who already an associate or agree with your culture, have your values? Like, it just makes sense. But not many organizations think that way.
Yeah. Well, the military, and I'm going to say specifically the Army, because the Navy is a little bit different with education and the other services are. So I want to make sure I stick to what I know for sure.
Mhm.
But we consume our own talent. I think that's a different mindset than a CEO of a civilian, private sector kind of company, where if they get it wrong on the interview, they can correct that and go try to interview better the next time. With us, we're growing. There are children, if you think of it from a parental standpoint, you have a vested interest in their future. And in normal corporations, you just don't have that family-like environment where, look, I as the commander of Cadet Command, I helped commission about 20,000 officers in the United States Army my last 2 years in the Army. And the joke always was, I sure hope I got it right. And people would say, yeah, we won't know for 30 years. 30 years, when I'm on my deathbed, someone's going to come in and go, you screwed it up. Way to go, or you go, hey, good job. And, nobody will be, none the wiser of the amount of pressure there was to go, how do you pluck a high school student and then put them into college and pay for their college and then develop them to go, yeah, I do want to bring them into the federal Army on active duty, and then put them in that pipeline as the sole 6,000 that we get that year, to include the United States Military Academy. The amount of investment just to get them in the door and then go, wow. But it's every officer and every non-commissioned officer along that pipeline who knows we have to invest in our capital, because there it is. That's our seed corn for the future. If we get this wrong now, the NCO is the sergeants, the great NCO backbone of the Army, always says, if I get this lieutenant wrong, 5 years from now, I'll have the major wrong, and I'm the one who's going to suffer. The subordinates, the blue collar side of the Army has a vested interest in making sure those white collar people understand what they do and appreciate and get in there, get their hands dirty with them. So you don't see that in the civilian sector.
Do you think, I love the word you say, it's not just pipeline or develop or track, it's consume. Like, we are wrapping ourselves around this individual to make sure they grow and can contribute not only to themselves and to the country and to the mission. Do you believe that non-government or non-military organizations can develop an environment where they can consume the talent that they have?
I think so. And, that's one of the things that we advocated the way forward is, there's all kinds of really smart guys like Simon Sinek and these others who run around and talk about it, and they do a great job. I love what they say. They've never really ever done it, but the fact that they talk about it is great because it gives me credibility to say their name out loud. So I love Simon Sinek. He comes and talks to the Army. He gives us great ideas. But you have to invest in your people. Okay. And so, we consume them, it's the old adage of the company that puts you in the mailroom and brings you all the way to the CEO. I think those days are dead. The following generations behind me and there's 6 of them in the workforce now. I don't think they would ever, aspire to something like that. Yeah. But I do think that when they come in at whatever level they come in, if you're not trying to develop that individual to go the highest potentiality within your company as you can aspire them to, then you've got this turnover and you've got this have to recruit. You hear more people recruiting and complain about computing than you do retention. And I think here's a fact for you. In higher education, you hear all these great statistics about University of X got this many freshmen, a record freshman class this year. Well, that's wonderful. But people who are not in higher ed don't realize colleges have to buy those freshmen. Yeah. And those freshmen don't hit on a return on investment until they're matriculated into their junior year. And in some cases, because it's not all schools, but in most cases, statistically, it takes 7 freshmen to replace a matriculating junior that transfers or quits. And guess when the scholarships run out? Guess when Guess when all these great programs run out? And that's that year.
Yeah.
And so for every one of those you lose, you have to get 7 more to break even, not to make money, but to break even. So the question for me in higher ed has always been, why in the heck aren't you focused on retention and get rid of all of your, not get rid of, but shift resources from recruiting to retention, because the return on investment is greater. But that doesn't seem to resonate very well with most.
I would, and I could be completely wrong when I say this. So please, if you're listening to this, call me out if you know I'm wrong. There are individuals who I work with and we work with who are chief acquisition officers, recruiters, and so on and so forth. And when I speak to them and we go to do work for them, they're like, dude, we need retention help. Like my team is so tired because they're always having to go out and find more and more people. And they know, at least the people who are coming to us, they know that retention is the solution, not just acquisition. And those are two different ways of solving the problem. If you think that your problem is just, acquisition of people, then you're going to, like you said, you're going to dedicate your resources to signing new toys to bring people in. But if you bring people in to sign new toys and they come into the culture, they're like, oh, I don't really like it here. They're going to leave. And now you have not got that return on your investment.
Well, you look at the national ways that we see how institutions are doing well. We ask them the wrong questions. If you go, top 10 universities, that recruiting is going to be one of the number one statistics. We had 10,000 students apply. We took 5,000. Okay. But I don't see any statistics on, and we retained 105% because we talked to people from that university to come to our university. Now you're thinking more from, and this is what academicians hate, is the word business associated with universities. But at universities, state-run universities, land grant universities, as those state funds have continued to go down, at around 80% 20 years ago to around 12% today, they have to become more business-like. And so my question always is, how did you get to be the president? Say, well, I have a PhD in mass communications.
Well, okay. Probably brought in a lot of donation money.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. But who runs the institution? Who? Well, the provost. Well, how'd they get the job? Well, they're a doctor in underwater basket weaving. Fascinating. And no offense to that. I'm trying to get the degree so I have more credibility just to talk to this community. But somebody's got to be in there. There's got to be a chief of staff. There's got to be somebody, a COO, who's building additional ways to bring in resources to lower college tuition, to get students in the door and to keep them there by investing in them throughout the long time that they're there. And then why are we not helping them to go into the job market? Why are we not getting companies to scholar them? I mean, the Army has a great system of going into a school and scholaring kids that we want to get into our business. If I was Amazon and Google and the bigs, out there, I'd be recruiting that way. Scholar these kids so they don't have college. They're going to flock to you, and then you help the school. So there's just simple stuff like that can be done that's not thought of.
But I think the reason why it's not thought of is because the definition of success is not correct.
Right.
Like, for example, many organizations, again, that bring us in to do work, I'm gonna use the D word. I know I'm not supposed to use it right now, but they're interested in diversity.
Yeah.
And
you're not supposed to use the word diversity now?
Hey, this is the world we live in. I'm just joking. No, I'm not. I've been told, we've been told, to utilize words more like being inclusive, because again, it just has developed a certain context around it that is not what it was meant to be. But now so many people in society and culture have deemed it to be certain things and so forth. So it's easier just trying to stay away from certain words, still get the work done. Okay. But when they're talking about being inclusive, because they know that they have to, their audience is diverse, their customers are diverse, and so in order to make sure they're having the right ideas and right reach and connections to those customers, then you got to make sure you have people who think like them and can connect with them. So it just makes sense from a business standpoint. And then they say, okay, well, we have this leadership development program, but we're developing these leaders and nothing happens. And I said, well, that's the problem. Your leadership development program is very successful. It develops leaders. But what are you focused on? Are you focused on just literally developing leaders? Or are you intentionally focused on advancing individuals?
Yeah.
Because those are two different things. You can develop leaders all day, and at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of people who are qualified, and then we all know that the people who excel or move to those next levels are all there because they have the right connections. They're connected with leaders who not only mentored them but advocated on behalf of them, who pulled them up. And so in your programs, are you building those really intentional pipelines and connections to those individuals who are going to make the hiring decisions, so they know these people and they're aware of these people when opportunities do come? And most organizations say, no, but we did teach them, budgeting skills. Like, it's just...
Yeah, it is interesting because again, it goes back to, what is your purpose?
Yes.
I mean, so many CEOs that I sit down with, and I got this blurred out thing behind me. You can see arrows. Can you see that?
That's cool.
Look, I will put a plug in. I'm dyslexic, and I work with a lot of leaders and really brilliant people who are dyslexic, because I'm doing my research on them, because it's fascinating to me how we are able to think differently and matriculate through a system that doesn't reward or encourage people who think like we do, which is very different than the neurotypical people. And so to me, that's a form of, I'm neurodiverse, which it gives me a different perspective, to look at things. And so when I look at them, I say, well, what is your purpose? And I just lose my mind being a soldier who, the core value is selfless service. It's so hard. I don't think you can ever shake that. I've had to hire people to charge other people money because I'll give them anything. You give me a phone, you're going to get it all for free. But when somebody says my purpose is to make money, it turns my stomach. I mean, or, when I hear the phrase, what's in it for me, it turns my stomach, because if a CEO is thinking that way, if that's their purpose, then there's no way in the world I would want to be on their team. What is the purpose of what we do? What is the greater impact of what we do? A CEO has got to explain that. Once they explain our purpose is to do X and aspire to do Y with it, therefore I'm going to train you, I'm going to develop you toward that goal. Then you craft what it is you think you need today to build on that purpose. And then you have to add to it where you think you might go. Because if that CEO is doing their job, they're up on the balcony, leaning over the railing, watching their workforce and making sure, do they have what they need? Am I providing the appropriate resources? Am I providing the appropriate guidance? Do they understand? Can they visualize? Am I describing what I need done? So then they can look up and go, yes, everybody's there, everybody's getting what they need. And then I can look to the future and say, what's coming? What are the opportunities? What are the potentiality problems? What's the political environment? What's the economic environment? What's the social environment? What are those things that I should be anticipating in my developmental journey for the people I have today? Assuming this is my cohort. How do I maximize this cohort? And that's when I see a gap and I might need to go higher. Not when I've not given a resource to somebody down there on the floor and they failed miserably and they've told me 10 times they can't do it. And I tell them to do it because I told you so.
Yeah.
And they don't do it and they quit. Now I get distracted with plugging holes.
Yeah.
And so the developmental plan, if you would, is the connective tissue that keeps it moving in the right direction.
Really brief story. I think you know this about me already, but again, started my career off really early. I think I was 23 years old when I was hired to create and manage the Executive Leadership Development Program for the U.S. Department of the Interior. which made no sense. But I got that opportunity, and I was able to flourish because of it. And I always tell people the thing that really advanced my career and advanced my knowledge on how to do what I do, and again, coach executives at a really young age, was because even though I was 23, my supervisor at the time brought me to every single executive level meeting they could bring me to.
Yeah.
Why? Was because I'm going to weigh in and change stuff? No, just to listen, to hear. And after every one of those meetings, we would come back to the office and we would discuss what was said and what happened, and also what was not said and happened. Because there's the surface politics where everyone sees what's moving, but then it's like, oh, why did this person support this, but they didn't support that? Oh, well, because they actually don't like this person. This person took resources from the other day, and it's like, I think you talked about it in an earlier interview you did, I think a couple of years ago, but just the importance of, they don't necessarily have to work for the general as long as they're around in the environment, the space of the generals. They can see the broader breadth of how decisions are made and how impacts are made,
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Every general officer has an aide de camp, and people think it's so he can carry your bag or she can, bring you a Coke. They're there. They're a younger set of eyes that have levels of training that we know they have, and they're trained observers. And they're listening, they're taking notes. And the moment you get in the car as you're driving away, you're not hearing, oh, you're wonderful, that was great. My last aide de camp, Tyler Johnson, just used to, sir, we need to go back because you said this. And it can be taken by my generation to mean that. And I'm like, oh, turn around. And we would go back. Everybody get back together again. I just had my aide tell me that I said this. This is what I meant, and I apologize if this is what I said. And that in itself is a part of caring. But we have aide de camps. In Afghanistan, I had a guy who did nothing but sit off to the side and take notes and watch the body language. I had a guard whose name said, I think it was Hernandez or Gonzalez. He was actually an Afghan interpreter who stood there and acted like he was a guard and spoke Pashtun. And so he would be out in the hallway with the guards listening about how they're getting ready to kill me. And so instead of going out that gate, we'd go that gate. And I was like, why are they so mad at me? They were like, well, you wore your boots into their general's office where there was a rug. You stepped on the rug with your boot. And I'm like, important safety tip. I said, here's $100. Go buy me a new rug. Let's go back. We got a rug at the market. Drove back, walked in, and I presented him with a really nice Persian rug and said, I'm sorry I stepped on your rug. And, and then my guards out there listening to their guards, and we were okay. But yeah, it's incredible. I in my book, War on Two Fronts, an Infantry Commander's War in Iraq and Afghanistan, if you pick it up, General Dick Cody took me everywhere with him. And then when we would get back, we would do the same thing. And then he would send me to meetings without him. And I would just sit in the back. And he would say, how did that go? Now, that was almost like being a spy, because sometimes people were like, we ain't doing any of that stuff he just said. And he would say, are they going to do it? And I go, I don't think they took it that, you really met those 4 priorities. And who said, sir, I don't want to tell. I'm right. I think you need to emphasize it some more, so you have to be very careful about it, so yeah, those are great skills, and just as well, and I know Bezos does this at Amazon. Didn't always go well from some people I've worked with, but you bring somebody up who you're tutoring, or you bring up an adversary within your organization, somebody who's, the top is always changing their mind and things are screwed up. And if I was in charge, okay, come on, be in charge with me for a week and have a naysayer go around with you, or build a tiger team and put a naysayer in charge of the tiger team. Say, okay, you solve it. You're smart. Here's 5 people. What do you need? Lock them in a room, give them a dry erase board. Say, okay, give me options because you're the smartest person in my company. And things get different fast.
What's hilarious about that is, so we do these multi-day workshops, like team building retreats and executive retreats. And it's always funny when we're doing team building ones where we have supervisors and non-supervisors, and you talk to individuals who are non-supervisors, and like, they just don't understand me. They make bad decisions. They don't understand what's going on. And then we and we talked to people who just became supervisors, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I didn't realize how hard it was. Like, so, like
Yeah.
when you say like naysayers and like, oh, well, yes, giving that, I really do believe that exposure tends to be the penicillin. But we don't do that as much. We, put people, they don't agree with us, put them in a room somewhere. I want to ask you a question, but I do wanted to share one real quick story about trust building. Again, earlier in my career, I managed all these. I also worked for the National Park Service for a while, managing their national youth employment programs, and just flew across the country working with all the leaders, how to increase hiring and so on and so forth. Yeah, not retention. That was my job at that point. But one of the coolest things was like maybe 3 months into working for my supervisor at the time, he sent me to this meeting that he couldn't attend, and and they were discussing the adoption of a new platform and what would do and how much it would cost and so on and so forth. And he couldn't make it, so he sent me just to take notes, not weighing in, just taking notes. And so I came back for the meeting, and him and I met, and he said, okay, what's your thoughts? I said, oh, this is what was discussed, X, Y, and Z. It's going to cost us this many millions of dollars over this many years. And he's like, so what do you think? And I was like, well, honestly, I don't think it's in our best interest. Like, this doesn't seem like it's going to meet our goals and X, Y, and Z. He said, okay, cool. He picked up the phone, called the person, said, no, we're not going to go with this. And I was like, oh my God, you're not going to fact check me? You're not going to, I was at a heart attack. But you know what? It showed how much trust he had in my word. And moving forward, I was very intentional with making sure I maintained that level of trust with him, because like he showed me he trusted me.
Yeah. I used to sit in these rooms in the Pentagon, there's the table. You go down the hallways at the end of the Pentagon where there's windows, which is unusual. And you go in this room and the table has all these journals, and they're all icons. At that point, every one of them. You heard every story about them, and you sit in the back, squeezed in with all the majors, and you're just sitting there. What Cody would do is I'd listen to the whole meeting, and the first time he did this to me, I wasn't prepared, and he would just try and go, "That's okay. Well, thanks. So I've got 3 things here to consider. This. He goes, hang on. He goes, Chris, where you at? Hey, what do you think? All these heads turn. You're like, oh my God. And so, but doing that just once, first it developed me fast.
Yeah.
I better be thinking about what I think and not just writing down what they're saying. So that caused me to have to think. The second thing was suddenly they're calling me.
Yeah.
The old man's thinking about this. What do you think about that? And he did that on purpose, because he would come in and sit down and he goes, I know Alex isn't buying any of this. He goes, so he's got to understand the bigger picture. And I'm not going to lay it all out for him because I don't have time, but here's how to help him connect the dots. And so that guy would call me and say, hey, what's going on? 99% of them, awesome. Mm-hmm. There's that 1%, who do you think you are? And you gotta, and then you got to navigate through all of that. Mm-hmm. So, it's got really good positive impacts, but also you are putting somebody like young Alex on the spot. You just killed the program, buddy.
Oh shoot! And I want to echo, just really quickly echo. There's 2 questions I want to get into the interview before we wrap up. I know we're running out of time. But no, this is awesome. I want to echo just your point. The other reason why he told me, the other guy brought me to every single executive meeting, because he's like, look, I need them to respect and know you when I'm not there. And if I keep you in a room and it's only me talking, then, if they only know me, then they're not going to. And I was like, thank you. So there's 2 questions I'd love to get through you real quick. So first is in regards to this idea of levels of executive leadership. I think there's a tendency to think that, oh, you are an executive. But there are definitely levels within the executive ranks. And I used to work with people at the Pentagon, and I work with officers who are like, oh my God, like when I was out in the field, I was the top dog. I was in charge. I was this and that. And now I'm in the Pentagon. I'm getting someone's coffee, right? It's all dependent on where you are. And so, what are your thoughts in regards to, once you enter the executive ranks, and then how do you maneuver to different levels within the executive ranks,
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the old big fish, small pond analogy, which I'm sure everybody's heard of. And so, and that's what it is. It's a series of ponds. In the Army, you're just, you're so proud of yourself. You jump from one pond, you land on it, like, oh my God, this lake's full of sharks, and all of a sudden you're a goldfish going, oh my gosh, I got to learn how to backpedal. But I get the best example I give you is, the Command and General Staff College, which is a tremendous program, which is a part of the Army University educational system. Actually, I think, because we don't know for sure how China does it, we think it's the largest university in the world at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And so the students come there. The Army cuts its officer corps at 50% about year 10 because there's just not the spaces. You don't need that many with a percentage of, fluff on it to continue that matriculation of officers. And so there's a distinct quality cut. And so when you make that quality cut, man, you are the man, or the woman, and you show up at the school. And so when I was the commandant there, the deputy commandant, you'd have 1,400 of, my, what doesn't stink in the room. Their heads are, they could have to turn sideways to come into the auditorium and sit down and say, hey, congratulations on your 50% selection to CGSC. You're all acting like you're the 1%, but let me just make it clear, you're now the 100%. And half of you in this room are immediately in the bottom 50% again. So let's level our expectation about what's happening right here. Because, quite frankly, you could all die in a car crash today and I could be close to you tomorrow. So you have to pop that bubble. Again, it goes back to Dunning-Kruger. The level of confidence jumps. Oh, I'm selected for this school. I'm selected for this next level of leadership. I'm going to be an executive in this pool now. Yeah. You got to pop the bubble. You got to humble, you got to bring them back to reality. Then you got to mentor them through that bubble, through that pond. And so that's what happens. You got to, you go, okay, I outgrew this pond. I'm being moved to the next level, not for what I did, but what they think I'm capable of doing. That's the key. Yeah. So you get in there and you have to exemplify, you have to prove that they've selected you right for the potentiality of what you can do. Yeah. And that begins with learning the environment, taking a look around, seeking out mentors, watching what's working, listening. And you land in that pond and you go, hi, I'm a goldfish. The sharks will consume you within minutes, if not seconds. Yeah. So that's the humility that you're getting that opportunity should be the first and foremost to that leader's perspective on why they're going there, and understand they're going there for potentially what someone thinks they can do. They got voted for that reason. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. We're going to have to jump on to do another episode. The last question I want to throw in really quickly is, I just did a video recently on right versus right decisions. And that's because when you have a choice between a wrong decision and a right decision, it's easy. Just don't do the wrong thing. Like, don't punch your employee. It's pretty simple. Just don't do it. But when you have a choice between a right versus right, it is absolutely right to want someone around you because they're loyal. And it's also right to it's also right to want someone around you because they have the merits. But that can conflict sometimes. Like, some people, they're super loyal, so you want them around you, but someone has really great merits, you want them around you. Which do you choose? Or loyalty. What's best for the organization's long term? That is absolutely right decision to make. What's also a right decision is what's best for the organization's short term situation. Like, people in pain right now. What do we do? I'd love to just ask you, have you ever dealt with, I know you have, but is there a right versus right decision that you can remember? What was it and how did you make that decision?
Yeah. I mean, with the right versus right decision, there's always that thing in the back of your head said, this might be the right thing to do, but should you do it? And then you have to sit down and weigh, what are the things that you think you stand for? What is it about you that you want other people to say about you when you're not there? Yeah. In terms of not ego, but in terms of, Colin Powell, it was the guy sitting next to him. Norman Schwarzkopf once said that somebody said, how do you learn about leadership? what were the things that taught you leadership? And he said, by working for a lot of bad leaders. He said, I learned more from bad leaders than I did good leaders. Yeah. And so what I did was I said, I'll never do that. If I get the opportunity to be in charge, I'll never do that. And so those things, as you grow in leadership roles from executive level to executive level, you carry some of those don't do's and do's with you. And so, and it's just a simple analogy, similar to what you are. I mean, there's so many. I can't think of anything really. I could really talk about some conflicting ones in Afghanistan, but I don't want to get political. But a simple one was, as a general officer, they said we're going to let you pick. When you're a brand new general officer, I mean, you're still a colonel. You've been selected. They give you the cool belt. You get a pistol. They pump your head full of stuff and then they pop it. They humble the heck out of you. And then they suddenly say, we're now going to let you pick an officer to be your aide de camp, somebody who is there to keep you on schedule, to take care of you, all that kind of stuff. And so my first instinct was, because you have no training, you've just seen other people do it. And I thought, I think I need to have somebody who I need to grow into a great officer by giving them exposure, but I need somebody who works well with me, somebody who gets my humor, somebody. And the problem was I picked myself. and great kid, love him to death. Didn't work. It didn't work because, I'm like, where are we going next? And he's got his whole bag in the back of the vehicle. He's got dirty laundry. He's trying to figure out where his calendar is. I needed somebody exactly the opposite of me. Neither choice was right. It just depended upon what was necessary. And what I ended up doing is I started picking people who were not like me, and who challenged me, like that last aide de camp. He was great. I mean, he was constantly challenging me on everything. He questioned everything that came out of my mouth. They all did. And they're all great kids. They still come to me, oh my gosh, that thing you said, I didn't agree with. It just happened today. And I did exactly the same thing. But it's trying to weigh out what is it that you're trying to accomplish. If you put people around who are just going to make you feel good about yourself, first off, you're creating another problem, which is you down the road. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better yes. There's so many of them because I think toward the end of my career, I had to make so many decisions about legal things. Because I was a general court martial convening authority as a commanding general of Fort Knox, Kentucky. And, there would be this case and there would be this case and they would be the same offense, but the conditions were so different. And so I prided myself on learning the differences in the cases and not having one size fits all judgment. It was a yes. Yeah, they're guilty. You're both guilty. I mean, it's easy to see this from the investigation and in some cases your admittance. But do I punish them the same? Do I give them the same, amount of things? Have they, so there's so much associated with these two yeses that sometimes I go this way, sometimes I go that way. And from outside, people looking in, they'll go, well, wait a minute. There's a double standard. That's what you hear a lot in the military. There's a double standard between officers and sergeants and privates. And again, it goes back to the two yeses. Yes, you can do this, but should you? Okay. And I think in hindsight, I'm very comfortable with every decision I made because, now I've been out here long enough. There's an old saying, you're never the beneficiary of your hard work. Someone else will benefit from the things you taught that person. You rarely see that growth in the period of time you're with them, unless you're with them for, an extreme amount of time. Some other leader is going to have that person come in with that value set that you taught them. And if you're lucky, somewhere down the road from that, you'll bump into them and they'll say thank you. And I've had that happen enough now in my old age to go, I'm comfortable I made the right yes.
First of all, don't do that. We're looking at you now. You can't be no more than like 26, 27.
Second, hey, let me turn the filter off on this cool show.
Second, for the audience, the last one he brought up, the right versus right, was the justice versus compassion, right?
Yeah.
It is absolutely right to want justice and to punish someone. It's also absolutely right to have compassion. And which one do you choose? I want to open the floor for you, Chris. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience as we wrap up?
Yeah, I really want to just say something about the why. Simon Sinek talks about always start with why, and that's in the decision process and that's in the hiring process. But as leaders, I try to teach that, the thing, having been from every one of these pools we talked about, the thing that I didn't like all the way back to my parents was being told to do something because I told you to. Do it because I'm the teacher. Do it because I'm the parent. Do it because I'm the boss. Why are you asking me why? Just do it. And that stuck with me, especially being dyslexic. I would always ask the why a lot. Why can't I just say this is the solution? Why do I have to show my work? Because my mind just jumps to the solution. So the why was always important to me in terms of respect. Because when somebody says, do it because I told you so, or don't ask me why, just do it, to me has always meant they don't respect me. And I've always taken it as an insult. In other words, you're too stupid to understand the why. And so that was the one thing I said, I will always give the why. And when you're a leader and you take that mantra on and say, I'm always going to give the why, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's the smartest thing you'll ever do. And you'll have teams that will just go to the lengths for you. And, there's video of me in Iraq telling my soldiers to take a knee, point their weapons to the ground and smile, and then turn and walk away from a rioting crowd at the Mosque of Ali. No one's ever been able to figure out why those soldiers did that or how we did that. And most have concluded they must have been terrified of you. Well, what they were terrified of was I raised them that I would always give them a why, with a caveat is, guys, someday, if I'm not giving you the why, it's because things are very bad. Please trust me and just do what I say. So it was the exception, not the norm. And so putting young men and women in a room and saying, I expect you to always demand the why. Because if you do, that requires the leader to know the why and give you the why. That way they don't get it from the other pool, do something. They'll also ask the why because they know you're going to ask the why. And eventually what happens is it comes to the leader who says, I want everybody to go out and stand in the rain. And somebody says, why? And you go, I don't know. That is kind of dumb, isn't it? Let's not do something stupid, because your organization is empowered to demand and ask and respectfully get the why. You do that, you build trust, in my opinion. That's my closing argument for you, sir.
I don't think you could close on a better note. And like you said, it's trust, and trust is like, it's like a well for water, right? You don't start digging your well when you're thirsty. You do it now, right? And you don't start building trust with your teams and your colleagues when you need them to trust you. Start building that trust now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I just want to just again thank you, Chris, for coming on. This has been an amazing conversation. I love every time I talk to you. We're going to bring you back on because you had so many other stories about your son and this other things I want to ask you. But I also want to get it on tape. So everyone, you know where I'm going with this. If you found anything of value from today's episode, please don't keep it to yourself. Please click the like. Please share it with at least one person. Don't just look back, reach back, bring someone else to the table. And as I end every episode, I encourage you to stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.